You learned in the previous clips that you can use layout panels to position your elements. In addition, you can set layout properties on your elements to position them within the space that the layout panel gives them. Let's take here a grid as an example that has a width and a height of 200 pixels. I put a button into this grid. As you can see, the horizontal alignment property is set to left and the vertical alignment property is set to top. This means that the button is displayed by default in the top left corner of the grid. On the grid, I have not set any row definitions or column definitions. This means that the grid has just a single row and a single column, so it is just a single cell and the button can be moved around in the whole grid. You can set the horizontal alignment property on the button to center the button horizontally in the available space. You can also set it to right to move the button to the right side of the grid. The horizontal alignment property can also be set to stretch. This value will stretch the button to the available width. Also, the vertical alignment property can be set to center the button vertically. When you set this property to bottom, the button will be placed at the bottom of the available space. Like horizontal alignment, you can also set vertical alignment to the value stretch, and then the button is stretched vertically to the available space. Now let's set on the button the width property to a value of 50. This means that the button has now this width of 50 pixels, so it is not stretched anymore to the available size of the grid. You can also set the height property on the button. Let's set it here to 25 pixels. This means now the button is also not stretched vertically anymore. So, as you can see, when you set the properties width and height, your element does not grow or shrink anymore. When you remove from this button here the properties width and height, then the button will grow again to the available size that it gets from its parent element, which is the grid. Beside these properties, an element has also a margin property. Let's set the margin property on this button to 50, which means that the button gets a margin of 50 pixels on every side. You can also specify two values like here, and then the button will look like this. 50 is in this case for the left and for the right margin, and 10 is for the top and for the bottom margin. You can also specify four values for the margin property in the order left, top, right, bottom. So here I've specified 0 at the end for the margin at the bottom, which means there won't be a margin on the bottom side of the button. Instead of separating the values for the margin property with spaces, you can also use commas if you prefer that. Now, in this demonstration, let's position the elements in the header of the customer's application. Let's switch to Visual Studio. Here I've opened the main window SAML file of the customer's application. Now let's use here a split view to bring in the designer. Here you can see the stack panel for the header, and here you see that the header is not aligned so well. First, I want to give the image element a margin of 5 pixels on every side. To do this, you can directly set the margin property here on that element, and now you see it has a margin of 5 pixels. Instead of using the SAML editor, you could also use the designer. As you can see, the image element is selected, and when you click here on this little light bulb, you can edit the most common properties for this element, like for example here the margin property. Instead of using the designer, you can also select the image element and open up the properties window of Visual Studio. Here you find also all the properties, and under layout you find the margin property that is set now to 5. So you could for example say here on the left side you want to set it to 10, and when you do that, you see in the SAML editor it changes to this value. Now let's just change it back to 5. Now the next thing is this text block here with the customer's app text. The stack panel here is a horizontal aligned stack panel, which means the elements just get their desired width. This means, in other words, when you set on this text block the horizontal alignment property, for example to write "nothing will happen" because that text block can't be moved to the right side in this horizontal stack panel. It gets just the width to display the text. So setting horizontal alignment here in a horizontal stack panel has no effect. But instead of this property, you can set the vertical alignment property. When you set it to bottom, you see the text block is placed at the bottom. In this case, I set this here to center this customer's app text. Now let's do the same for the version 1 text block. Let's also set on this one the vertical alignment property to center. In addition, I want that this text block is not directly beside the customer's app text. So let's set on this one a margin of 10. Now let's assume that you also want that this version 1 text is on the same baseline as the customer's app text. I have an idea how we can do this. Let's set vertical alignment to bottom, and now let's give it a margin of 10 on the left side, 0 at the top, 0 at the right, and for example 20 from the bottom. Yeah, it looks like 20 is not enough, let's use 25, that was too much. Let's use 22 from the bottom. And now this version 1 text is on the same baseline as the customer's app text. So now the elements of the header are positioned correctly, but the stack panel itself should be horizontally centered in the application window. Let me show you how to do this in the next clip.